Hi, everyone, and welcome to Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and today I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Mary Sanders. We're going to be talking about a variety of topics around our energy body, chakras, and more. So look forward to this conversation as I know it's going to unfold into things that we have heard in the past and new things to come. So, Dr. Mary Sanders, for those of you who aren't familiar, with a wealth of experience as a self-employed medical intuitive and chiropractor, Dr. Mary is deeply committed to guiding individuals on their journey of personal transformation. She focuses on helping people to cultivate thriving health, happiness, and purpose through the powerful tools of energy medicine, spiritual embodiment, and meditation. Dr. Mary hosts the internationally acclaimed podcast Energy Medicine, which discusses everything related to aligning the mind, body, and spirit. Dr. Mary earned her doctorate in chiropractic from Logan College of Chiropractic in St. Louis. She completed her certificate in positive psychology from the Wholebeing Institute in Lennox and studied under Dr. Tal Ben Shahar. In addition, she completed her master's in intuition medicine from the Academy of Intuition Medicine in Sausalito, California, and studied under Dr. Francesca McCartney. Dr. Mary, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Liz. I sincerely appreciate being here today. I'm looking forward to having a juicy yet heartfelt conversation. So I'm all yours and I'm super excited.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Super excited to have you as well. I always like to ask my guests to start off with what led you to doing the work that you're doing today?
I love this question. And I don't want to scare you or the audience, but in order for me to answer this question, I need to go back. I need to go back in my timeline, and start by sharing with everybody listening that I am hearing impaired. I came into this world with a 50% hearing capacity. And so I went undiagnosed for the first 3 years of my life. And so I had those 3 years in order to live in this domain, that spiritual domain, that thin veil that exists between here and there. And it's just a blissful place to be. And you're just assimilating so much information, like the curiosity, the senses, the overload, just is such a beautiful place. And so I spent my first 3 years. I mean, I obviously I didn't know at the age of 3 that's what was happening. But because I was undiagnosed with my hearing impairment, I didn't know, I couldn't hear the words of sentiment from my family. I could feel the energy. I could sense the love. I intuited that, my sense of belonging was here on this planet. So it was such it's a blessing, really, in all honesty. But I knew at a young age that because I was developing early on my ability to perceive and receive information beyond my traditional five senses, and listeners, for all of you out there, you all have the capacity to intuit this information. But especially if you have a physical challenge in one area, I think just because of survival, you start to assimilate information differently. And so my first 3 years of life, I was literally using my hands to feel my way around. And so I knew at a very young age that my hands were meant to be on physical bodies. Like I knew that I have to have my hands on people. And most people listening are like, oh, wow, well, I didn't have that kind of gift. I didn't have that sense of knowing. I'm still trying to figure it out. How do I do all of this? But for me, it was really clear. Like I knew that that was my purpose. So to fast forward it, listeners, I chose to stay in this physical domain and on this planet with my family. And so I contractually renegotiated some contracts so that I could just mainstream myself and fit in as the youngest girl of three in a Catholic family in the middle of the Midwest of a town of 20,000 people. So that's what I did. I still had some spontaneous information come through me as I was an adolescent. I did not know what I was tapping into, but it was still flowing. And then when I decided to, I went to both of my parents are academics, so I was mainstreamed in my education, and I was wired to achieve academically. So, what to make a long story short, I went and I studied chemistry and zoology in my undergraduate, and then I ended up in chiropractic school 3 days after my graduation. And it was at that time, Liz, that I knew with the trillions of cells within my body that I landed at the right place. All of a sudden, people were telling me that the human body could heal from above, down, inside out. They were asking us as students to tap into our knowing, like, how do you receive information? So I practiced as a chiropractor for many years, and to make a long story short, I kind of lost my true north. I deviated from the healing path and went into kind of being a businesswoman, and I drove myself pretty hard to a level of burnout that forced me to leave my practices. And at that time, my husband and I decided to move internationally to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. And that's when I decided to complete my yoga teacher's training. And it was at that time, because it was the first time in my entire life that I allowed myself to slow down and to feel and to connect with my physical body. That's when I finally surrendered and leaned into meditation. And it was in my experience in meditation that I started to experience all these magical, wonderful gifts that I had desensitized myself with, and or from, I should say. And I was like I was a child all over again, exploring new things, and then it was new with a new realm. Then I went and studied the neuroscience of meditation, because why not? Because I really was blown away by what meditation was creating for me. And I was like, what's happening, people? Because I know the neurology exceptionally well from the neck on down. I was like, what is happening in the brain when you meditate? And so I learned with Dr. Tal Ben Shahar, the neuroscience, like what was happening within the brain. And I got even more fascinated. So I knew the mind, I knew the body. Now as life happened, I knew that there was an awareness. I've always known the biofield exists. I've always received information, and I knew that I still had to show up in a new way in order to be of service. And that's when I went to the academy. And I because both of my parents are academics, I always have had the belief system that if you want to excel, that you get additional training and you have mentors that show you the way on how to do these various different modalities and techniques. And so now I show up in the realm as a medical intuitive, and I pull from my intuition medicine. I pull from my positive psychology, and I pull from the neuroscience of chiropractic. And I hold space for healing and transformation for others, not because others are broken or that they need fixing, because everybody that I hold space for is whole. They are complete. They're beautiful and unique as they are as individuals, and they wish to have a higher expression of self. So, Liz, that's turned up being a longer answer than what I had planned on being, but there you have it.
Longer but beautifully and beautifully spoken too. I like all the points that you highlighted, and I really want to dive in to several of these that I've jotted down. I want to go back though, because I am currently getting ready to publish a fourth book on intuition, and I've been researching this as well, is how when our other senses aren't available to us, how the rest of our senses pick up, especially our extrasensory perception. So you are hearing impaired, you're at 50% capacity, you find that is your physical challenge. How has that amplified all of your other senses, and where have you seen that, function throughout your life? How did that show up for you? What's your main Claire?
Okay. Yeah, well, originally as a young child, it was psychometry. It was my ability to perceive and receive information through my hands. Okay. So I was the kid And I thought that this was normal. So, listeners, I'm not making this up. So, I told you I was raised in a Catholic family, and I found myself in a pew every Friday night at 5 o'clock. I didn't know why I was there. I did not know that the guy with the big robe in front had a story to tell. So, I made up games, and my favorite game was to position myself between my mom and my dad. And I would take my mom's hand in my right hand, and I would take my dad's hand in my left hand. And I would imagine an electrical current coming through my mom, zapping my hand. And then I would run it through my body and I would zap my dad. And then I would run my dad's energy into my hand, run it through me, zap my mom. And I literally would entertain myself for hours running energy. I had no idea what I was doing, but at the age of 3, I was just zapping everybody. I just wanted to zap and play and be in that realm of energy, you know? I mean, I was totally entertained by that. So that's an example as to I just was feeling my way through the world. And as it happens that I didn't realize, and again, I didn't know how to I didn't have names for these things as I was growing up, but I would get spontaneous downloads of just abstract information. And I can remember that my mother, I wrote, like, this is an example. I must have been, so I wasn't old enough to drive. So let's say, but I was in high school. So it must have been 14 or 15. And I remember riding my bike. It was summertime and there was a neighborhood pool. And I stopped at the neighborhood pool because I saw the ambulance there. And I saw one of my, he was a year ahead of me in class, but anyway, he was being rolled onto the gurney, onto the ambulance. And I had no idea what had happened. I didn't see anything beforehand. I got on my bike. I rode home as fast as I could, came barging into the kitchen table, and I said, Mom, I just saw Tom getting loaded onto an ambulance. He has a collapsed lung. And my mom looks at me like, what? And I said, yeah, he has a collapsed lung. And she's like, how do you know this? Did you talk to somebody? Did you see something? And I'm like, no, but I know. And she's like, you can't possibly know this information. And I'm like, yeah, but, and I'm trying to eat my words. And I knew exactly what had happened with Tom. And so later on, you know how the gossip tree, the phone tree works. And later on that evening, I get a phone call. Another one of my friends was like, yeah, Tom went into the hospital with a collapsed lung. And I'm like, I kind of knew that.
Wow.
So it's just spontaneous information that travels and flows through us, right? We have access to all of this information. It's not separate from us. We are part of it. We just have to allow the information, if you will, to tap into it. So today I show up with still a keen sense of psychometry in a different way. I can remotely feel another person's life force energy and their biofield and detect when other people's energies are congested in that. I have clairvoyance, clairsentience is another really big one, and that, if you wish, I'm happy to go into how that developed for me. I think maybe some of the listeners might relate to this as well.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead because it really sounded like when you were sitting in the pew
Okay.
with your parents and you're running this energy back and forth,
Yeah.
you were tapping into like that feeling sense in your body, that energy movement in your body, that clairsentience. And when you were speaking about, getting into chiropractic school, and I heard in an interview that I watched with you, that you really felt like you found your people when you hit that because they're asking you like, to feel. Yeah. So
hmm
please go ahead
hmm
and what
And
was that
so,
experience for you?
yeah. Yeah, Liz, and I would say that clairsentience is probably my premier Claire, if you asking me to prioritize it. And listeners, for every person, just like Liz is going to have a book of a definition of what clairsentience is, and my definition may or may not fit within her definition, but we are using the same sensation and the same feelings and the same information. So I don't have the gift of being able to pick up a pen, let's say at an antique store, and say, oh, I feel the woman, that owned this before lived in such and such a locale and that she was XYZ. I don't have that ability. But clairsentience to me is that I receive a lot of information from other people, from my environment, from other people, the things and places and the people that are in within my environment. And I say that because I want to share that as I was growing up, hearing impaired, the youngest of three girls, my father was a great provider and he was a quote unquote functional alcoholic. And so he was very volatile in his emotional state. And so I couldn't necessarily hear him come into the garage door through the kitchen, but I could certainly feel the frequency shift among my sister and my two sisters and my mother, and I felt the shift within the house. And I believe this to be true. I think clairsentience does get assimilated and integrated within the space of the second energy center. And so from this space, right, I was trying to navigate safety. I wanted everybody, including myself, to be happy and safe and relaxed because when it is volatile, that's stressful. And so, I believe that children that are raised in unsafe environments, such as that, they become really empathetic. They become very clairsentient. And it took me a long time to be able to distinguish what is mine versus what is someone else's. And to this day, I still get compromised, but I recognize the symptoms pretty quickly these days, and I know how to flush that out of my system. And I guess the way that it shows up for me now in a fine-tuned way is when I'm holding space remotely, is that I can physically feel the physical sensations of what's happening in another person's body. I can trace and follow as spirit guides me through my body in relation to helping somebody else diagnose what's going on within their system or how to help facilitate healing for another. So it's an honor, it's a privilege. It is something that I do not take lightly, and that it's my favorite thing to do in the entire world is to hold space for somebody that way.
That's beautiful. You also referenced, which energy center it focused in on when you were talking about being able to read a person, being able to read the environment and create that sense of safety for people, in your life. So, how do the energy centers, function in our day-to-day capacity? And like, how do they show up? How can we witness it? How can we get curious about our energy centers and how they play a role in, you know, whether our communications with others or our environment?
Sure. I love talking about our energy centers because they really are an acute sense for receiving information. So when I talk about the chakras, and listeners, for some of you, you may be thinking that this is a little esoteric. And this is a science that has been around for over 3,000 years. I mean, this comes and originates, we're talking from the Vedic sciences, we're talking about thousands of years ago. And what we know, even though we live within a biofield that still remains invisible to us in the naked eye, we are constantly in flux with our environment. And science tells us that there's a Heisenberg principle that shares with us that the molecules are always in constant motion and are in a state of fluidity in our environment. And so when we look at the functions of the energy centers, there's three primary functions. We receive information from our environment, we assimilate that information, and then the last component is we express ourselves through these energy centers. Now, we can diagnose each individual, if we're just talking about the physical body, it's just the seven lower energy centers, but we know, Liz, that there's so many more energy centers beyond that. But for the sake of the physical body, we know that each energy center has its own nerve plexus. So it's almost like it has its own little brain. It has its own little the nerves that fire into it. There's an associated endocrine gland with each of the energy centers. And so that means that our hormones are being regulated by these energy centers. And there are overarching emotional themes that show up within our lives that can imprint, if you will, or program these energy centers as well. And so, because we live in a fluid environment, we know that we can, through thought and intention, we can calibrate our energy centers based upon our environment. So, we have a lot of control over our energy centers, and that I think is really, really empowering. We're coming up on Thanksgiving dinner here in a couple of weeks. And so that means when I sit down, whether I just have dinner with my husband, I can auto calibrate my energy centers accordingly and be more open. But if I was in a larger group of family members and some of them were critical or too domineering, then I would auto calibrate my energy center to look a little bit differently in that kind of an environment. So I'm always reacting to the environment, and I invite people to learn more about how to auto calibrate the energy centers for the health and well-being, because it's your given right to protect yourself in various different environments. So, Liz, I've lost track as to what your original question was about, but I guess you were asking me about how the functionality of these energy centers impacts us, and it does it chemically, emotionally, physiologically, and energetically.
Perfect. No, that was great, Dr. Mary. I appreciate that. And I want to also highlight, the environment that you grew up in and that having that volatile emotional energy in the house or some other energy in the house does help us hone our skills because as young children, when we want to keep ourselves safe, we have to be able to assess our environment to make sure that we have that safety or our loved ones have that safety. And I think that's one of the main ways that, psychics, mediums, and highly sensitive people actually train their gifts is through their experiences as in childhood. And that's one of the experiences I know that was relevant for me as well. My mom was in a lot of pain. I had to assess, which mom was I going to get this morning? Was it going to get the good mood or the mom in pain? So I think it helps train like being able to read somebody, being able to read the energy of a person, being able to read the energy of a room, and really make that assessment integrated into our bodies and then function accordingly. So I'm glad that you pointed that out too, because I think that really plays a role in like the advancement of our gifts as we're growing up.
So true. Thank you for sharing that because I think that's just another lens in which safety, it's all about, the survival mechanisms. We are designed to keep ourselves safe.
Yes, we are. And that lives in our first chakra, that safety survival chakra. We're plugged into the planet. That's all about money and finance, survival. Let's go through the chakras. And I love the chakras. I work with the chakra and auras myself, having been trained in Barbara Brennan's science. So let's go through the chakras for our listeners, from your perspective and what you bring to the
Mhm.
table around the energy centers.
Oh, by the way, shout out to Barbara Brennan. I love her work.
Yeah, me too.
When she looks at the various different body types and the characterologies, and she really does a fine job breaking down the front versus the back of the energy centers and how we use it for control and for withholding or for stagnant energy. It's just fascinating how I highly recommend everybody read the Hands of Light book. It's a great read.
It really is.
So
She's amazing.
for many years, I had that book up. Yeah, for many years, I had that book on
Behind
my
me.
coffee table. And when I would sit down to, yep, I've got two versions on my chart or my desk over here. So
Me too.
let's see. The energy centers. So, Liz, I really am looking forward to you chiming in and adding additional information. So if I forgot anything, let me know. You already talked about the first energy center, and that's located deep within our pelvic bowl. And as Liz mentioned, it's all about safety, security, trust. Big TRUST, that you will always be trust, cared for, and loved, nurtured. We also know that when you are aligned with your purpose, when you have financial issues, or if there's a poverty type mindset, it comes from that energy center. And that energy center happens to be closest to the earth. And it's the slowest of all the energy systems that we have. So as far as it has to do with our physical body, our vitality. And so its resonance, its spin, its frequency, as far as levels of consciousness, that is a basic of all survival seeking needs. And we, every day, whether we're conscious of it or not, we're cycling earth energy through the soles of our feet. Some say we're cycling it through our meridian system. Some say it's just part of the biofield and the resonance of the Schumann's resonance. However we do it, we're in constant exchange with that earth energy to help support and to saturate our first energy center. And what I have seen with the nerve plexus, so we're talking about the nerves that exit out of the sacrum and surrounding the coccyx in the last maybe two lumbar vertebrae. So the lumbosacral nerve plexus controls this area. And as far as the endocrine system, mostly I see the adrenal system. I see the adrenals, which we all know sit on top of the kidneys, and the adrenals are they're our organ that's ready for fight or flight. So when you're revved up, you get your epinephrine, your norepinephrine, your cortisol, your DHEA. All of those hormones come from the first energy center. So if you are a person who is always on the go, high stress, high demand, and has been doing it for your entire professional career, you may find that this energy center is becoming a little bit more depleted. And so when we live on that kind of a level, we're depleting our life force energy, right? We're pulling from our resources in order to meet the demands of our daily lives. And so these are the people who say, "Oh, I can't possibly meditate. I don't have enough time." They do, however many cups of caffeine in the morning to get up and get going, and that they have their sugar in the afternoon when they start to drop, and then they crash, or they have alcohol in the evening, and then they get a poor night's sleep. So that's the cycle that will deplete the first energy center. And again, emotionally, these are people that possibly have abandonment type issues. They grew up in unstable households. They have a sense of an overall lack, like they're never going to have enough. And so those are the emotional themes that you see come up within the space of the first energy center. So if you move up in the pelvic bowl underneath the belly button, you're going to find this second energy center. And that's really all about creativity. I mean, if you think about it, for women, it associates with the ovaries and the uterus. I mean, that's where we carry small babies, and that's how we bring life into this world. But for me, what I've seen is that this center not only connects with our creation, but it's like, what are your deepest desires? And you can think about the second energy center as being sexual desires, but you can also think about, like, wow, what do I really desire this lifetime around? And there's a handful of us that ask those questions on a daily basis, like, what do I desire? So the nerve plexus, again, is going to be the lumbar spine, but instead of connecting with the butt, thighs, knees, ankles, and feet, which come from the first energy center, now we're looking more at possibly the bladder, the kidneys. We're looking at the large intestine, ascending, transverse, descending into the rectum. So that's the second energy center, including ovaries, uterus, testes in the men. So this is all about uh, getting your needs met, your satisfaction in life, and again, your creativity, what you choose to create in this world. The third energy center is, most of us know it as the solar plexus, and that lays in the upper abdomen, just underneath the sternum and the xiphoid process of the ribs. And that energy center is all about sovereignty, individuality, control. So that's your ability to show up in your essence, like to be fully full of yourself. And in this energy center, when it's compromised, it affects like your self-worth, your self-confidence, like your authority within, your confidence within yourself. The enteric nervous system resides within this area, and the enteric nervous system is pretty unique in that you're going to have branches of the vagus in here. So you're talking about your organs such as liver, gallbladder, spleen, pancreas, and into your stomach, and your small intestines. And so this is, if you think about the primary function, and it's associated with the pancreas. And so the pancreas is all about your sugar metabolism. So if you're unable to metabolize your own energy, right, it affects your ability to express oneself through the space of the third energy center. So you can have like issues of pancreatitis, you can have a hepatitis, you can have gallstones, you can have immunity issues, you can have overall loss of vitality. Obviously, you can, have your blood sugar issues. Those show up physically and chemically within the body. These are the individuals who, when they were growing up, had a pretty domineering parent that maybe was a hovering parent or a helicopter parent, and that they, when you were learning how to speak, would put words into your mouth, or possibly they would force feed you because there was another kid coming down, who's being born into this family again. Those that comes from the third energy center. I think that's all I really want to say about that space. And then the lower three energy centers are all about the physical body, right? And then we move into this like transitional zone of the heart space. And this is where the heart chakra really kind of has its own toric field. So for those of you that are not aware of what a toric field is, they say that as we descend down through our spirit entering our body, it enters in through the crown of the head, and it descends down a vertical power current, and then it hits the earth and it bounces back up in the energy. So you've got a pathway of liberation, a pathway of manifestation in the vertical power current, and it comes up and it spirals out and creates this like donut shape toric field. And that's notoriously, when you look at a picture, that's what it looks like. Now, the Earth also has her own toric field. And so the energy centers that we have are just kind of in alignment, if you will, in mirroring what the Earth has. And the reason I'm talking about the vertical power current and the toric field is that within our heart space, we also kind of have a horizontal power current that connects us to universal love and consciousness. And so as we move through the space of the heart, which is the transitional energy center, bridging the space between the physical and the lower three energy centers with some more of the spiritual domains within five, six, and seven. And so this heart space can very easily be a magnetic component to the electromagnetic current that runs within us. And so if we can sit within a state of gratitude, appreciation, acknowledgement, for another person, place, or thing, then that allows us to magnetically attract it back into our lives. And the heart space, everybody says, yeah, I know what it's about. It's about love. And yes, it is about love, but we'll go, a little step further and say it's about self-love and self-compassion and self-forgiveness so that we can hold space for others in the same way that we hold space for ourselves. If we are, and again, if we're super rigid and we're in a level of perfectionism and we're hard to forgive, that can compromise the energetic flow of the physical heart. And that again is tied into the vagus, and that again is tied into the autonomic nervous system. But when I think about the heart itself, when I think about the lung tissues, the breath tissues, those are the physical areas that the body, that energy space governs. And the endocrine gland associated with it is the thymus. And most people are like, what's the thymus? What does the thymus do? And the thymus is an active endocrine gland up until the age of 18. It helps us, develop our immunobodies. So our immune system still gets enhanced as we are going through childhood. But it's even though it may be underactive as adults, we can still tap that energy center to activate the thymus and bring some energy into it. Okay, so now I know that's a lot of information. I could talk all day about chakras. I love chakras. The
Go,
fifth
go, keep
energy
going.
center located in the go, 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 go. Um, the fifth energy center is all about authentic expression in my world. People say, it's about communication. It is, and then some. It's about being able to express authentically your essence. And for some of us, we're verbally gifted. For other people, it can be that you're gifted as far as writing. Maybe you're gifted as far as dance. Maybe you're gifted in all the beautiful ways that we can express ourselves. It's not necessarily tied to the voice itself, although, obviously the fifth energy center is located in the center of the throat, right in front of the vertebral bodies of C4, C5. We know that it's most intimately connected into the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland has to do, once again, about your metabolism and your ability to metabolize I'm going to say frequencies, but chemicals within the system. The body parts, the regions are not only the throat and the cervical plexus, but it comes into the jaw, it comes into the lips and into the teeth and into the ears. And oftentimes, and again, this has been whew, Liz, I don't know how to say this. This has been probably my biggest energy center for healing this lifetime. Obviously with my hearing impairment, but I was taught and raised in an environment that, people they wanted me to be seen. My parents wanted me to be seen in all the events, but they never really wanted to hear what I had to say. I could not express my opinion because how dare I speak out to an elder, or how dare I, override somebody else's opinion. So, or to talk back. So those were all wounds that I carried that I had to really step into the light of finding my authentic expression in that. I can speak from personal experience that it's related to cervical disc issues, to neck issues, to voice projection, and can also thyroid Hashimoto's, but you can also get like cystic breakouts on the neck, as the result of toxicity in this area as well. I've had that as well. The sixth energy center we know as our third eye. This is rapidly becoming one of my favorite energy centers because it is connected into the pineal. And I love the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is associated with melatonin, your light and dark sleep cycles. It's connected into the suprachiasmatic nucleus behind the eyes, the superior ganglia, and the pineal. And if the heart is the magnet, the pineal is the electrical component. It's the electrical charge, the piezoelectrical changes that happen within the physical body. And the pineal is located in such that it's positioned right between two major ventricles, which are just holes within the brain that connect the fluid, cerebral spinal fluid. And so you can literally direct energy into the ventricles and create a pressurized spray into the pineal to activate the biochemical process of melatonin. And as we do that, there's like 5 different branches of chemical endogenous opioids that we can create. It can really be very effective for pain management and also for tapping into the bliss body and natural opioids, if you will. So that has to do with the third eye located in the forehead itself. And so we're talking about clairvoyance, where our ability to perceive and receive the truth. What do we see? Our eyes open versus our eyes closed. And so there's a lot that you can do, quite honestly. And I'm sure Liz has written about this in her book about developing clairvoyance, whether it be light deprivation goggles or, blurring vision, near focus, far focus, things of that nature. But you're looking at the pineal, you're looking at the possibility of imbalances right and left side hemispheres. You're looking at vision problems, headaches, earaches sometimes, but really it's the headaches and the vision stuff. Again, when you think about, the dogmatic environment that we possibly live in, if you can't really see the truth, I think sometimes that if you're too black and white, you're not able to blur the various different shades of gray that come in between to be able to see the truth in various different environments and peoples and places and things. So I love the pineal gland, the sixth energy center. The seventh energy center located on the crown of the head, as I already mentioned, this is the energy center that connects us to all that exists that's outside of us. The direction of our life force energy and as our spirit enters into the body comes from above down into the space of the seventh. And so for those people who are a little bit too analytical or too black and white in their thinking and they can't think abstractively. I think sometimes that can compromise the seventh energy center. And the other thing that I want to say is that there can be distortions, that show up within the seventh energy center when you see people who are looking for like a spiritual bypass, like they don't want to connect into the physical body, but they want to go up and out into the realm of the unseen. And so that opens up a whole nother, Pandora's box of conversation as to what exists outside of there. But as far as the seventh energy center, Barbara Brennan talks about a characterology called schizoid, and it's a second arrest in the various different characterologies in which people like these are the kind of people that have scoliosis. and that they twist energetically and they can't wait to leave their physical body and go back into the spiritual realm. And so they appear to be spacey, they appear to be forgetful, or they appear to not be able to do their accounting or their finances or their books or things of that nature. So that's it in a nutshell, Liz. That's a lot of information, and I know that you and I could go on for days on this topic.
We probably could. And Dr. Mary, I knew you were going to bring a specialized view on the chakra centers. And I'm glad I asked the question, and I'm glad that you went into depth. And thank you for bringing in Barbara Brennan's work and even the distortions and the characterizations, because, even with, as you were talking about that twisted personality structure, I was just feeling that fear that schizoid character type holds in the body. They don't want to be grounded into the body, which goes back to that safety and survival of that first chakra. They want to be out of the body because in the body is not safe for one reason or another. So thank you for bringing that. I kind of want to, let's dive deeper into the distortions that can happen, because I think that's really relevant these days. And I think bringing people's awareness to the distortions that can happen within the physical body, emotions, and the chakras would be a benefit.
Sure, sure. Before I move into the distortions, I have a quick, kind of a funny story to share about. I did a branch off of Barbara Brennan's, the Wake Point School of Energetic Healing, and must have been my second year in. And at that time, my husband, who is still my husband, he was taking the course with me. The instructor says, "Okay, stand up if you think that schizoid is the least prominent of your character structure." And so I stood up like I didn't even think twice about it. And all of a sudden I'm standing there in front of the class, and the instructor and the teacher's assistants were laughing. They were laughing and laughing and laughing. And I'm like, what? And I couldn't see it. I couldn't see that schizoid was one of my major, major defense mechanisms. And just like you said, I was one of these people, like I could be really, really, really fit. Like I want to be an athlete. I've worked out my entire life. And so I always thought that schizoid people were airy, fairy, thin, tall, lanky kinds of people. And they are, but it's like I would find myself really super agitated when somebody couldn't, they didn't know what 2 plus 2 was, or if they couldn't stay in their body, they couldn't do the structural tasks in front of them. And so I learned during that class that from a characterology standpoint, the schizoid is very prevalent, and that I do have a spinal twist. I do want to escape. I'm very, very I manifest in the quantum level like nobody else's business. I astrally travel. I leave my body. And so they just laughed and laughed and laughed. And to this day, obviously, it traumatized me a little bit, but I learned that, if you can't identify it in somebody else, or you don't see it within yourself, chances are it's pretty prevalent.
Yeah,
So that's
100%.
my
And I
schizoid
was
center.
right there with you too,
Yeah.
always out of my body, always spacing out in dream world as I was growing up. It was a favorite place to be. And I think a lot of people like seekers, meditation, want to feel the bliss, want to feel consciousness. Like that's what we're doing. We're, like popping out all the time, but instead of like grounding down into our bodies. Thank goodness I had enough Capricorn in me, some earth energy in me to keep me grounded. So but it took me years to be able to like self manage like both. And I still find myself like with ADD, and everything just like like going out and having a good time and then coming back. And it's one of the things that when I was going through the 4-year program that I really had to focus with. And I can picture two right now. One, my third chakra, and two was like spacing out. And that was one of the things that the teacher said. It's like you can put your hands on somebody and go on this wonderful journey, out in the astral, but you want to be in your body and grounded and present for your client. And that's just one thing that's like stuck with me, is that we need to be grounded. We need to be in our bodies. We need to be running energy to have presence for, people on our tables when it's transitioned into people in my life. It's been super beneficial.
That's a great story. That's a great story. I love hearing that. So I'm not alone. We're not alone.
No.
So, we can commiserate with all of that.
Yes.
It is a big training to stay home. That was really emphasized for me when I was at the academy. I was just like, I got to close down my seventh chakra and I need to open up my first chakra. And that'll be my first, my first distortion that I'll talk about. And I see this, and I'm sure you see it. These are the people that are scared to death. They have life death issues. Like they're scared to death, no pun intended, but they are scared of dying and they're very fearful of living in their home. Okay. So you and I are classic examples. We had a very narrow aperture with the first energy center, and then we had a wide open seventh energy center. And so I try to tell everybody, like think about it, like an hourglass. If you want to be super expanded and open and out there with your seventh, then you've got to be super expanded and open and down there in your first energy center. You've got to be deep and wide in order to be able to hold that capacity to go up and out. It's only been recently that, and I'm talking about, over a decade's worth of training, that I'm allowing myself to go back out into the quantum and like, get blissed out. And then, I've got to come back and come home and get regrounded. So that's a theme that I see a lot. I see first and seven energy split. I also see two and five distortion a lot, primarily in women. These are women who have been caretakers, their entire lives, and that they have, they've done what they thought society expected of them. They raised their families and perhaps they took care of their parents and they put everybody else's needs first and never really connected in with within their own deepest desires. And then they had big troubles or difficulties in expressing their true essence. And so that distortion shows up two and five simultaneously. I also see one and three and six quite a bit. So these are people not wanting to ground because they've had somebody who's been an external influence, a heavy control person, whether it be a spouse or whether it be their parents that non-contractually, courted from behind on their third energy center. So they didn't really have that authoritative sense of autonomy. They did what other people expected of them. And they really didn't trust in the process. They just did what they told. And therefore, when it came to seeing the truth in all situations involving the six, the 1, 3, 6 distortion didn't allow them to see what was real versus what was not real. So it's super hard to hold space, not super hard, but to hold somebody, in a state of compassion to explore that dynamic. And then once they see it, they're like, oh my goodness. I didn't see I was doing this to myself. This was just how my pattern has been all my life. So I see distortions 1, 3, and 6. Let's see, what else do I see? So the fourth energy center, God bless, bless the beautiful fourth energy center, right? Because it shows up under a oftentimes in the American society under an extreme rigid characterology structure. And these are the perfect people, They have the perfect house, they have everything's clean and organized and methodically placed, and they're very strategic, like they are planners, they're executors, they are very rigid and they have matching belts and purses, then their shoes match, and they look very polished on the exterior. And I was raised by, a super rigid mother, and so that compromises, that emotional feeling center, the distortion within. Yeah, you're nodding your head. It's challenging to tap into that, even though we hold space for others and it's supernatural for us to do that. But wow, man, having to overcome the perfectionistic attitude, like good enough is okay, instead of it being like, well, if it's not perfect, I'm not going to put it out there because somebody could ridicule it, somebody could criticize it. So, so many distortions there. Do you have some that you would like to talk about as well, Liz?
It's really interesting. You've highlighted many of them, and I know a lot of our listeners will also resonate because, especially in our age group, we were raised like this, like you were saying, like be seen and not heard, have that, uh, 136 where we're controlled by other people, or that perfectionism that comes in when we have that parent that's functioning in a very rigid way, and then we pick up that rigid because it's being modeled to us, or we have to be a certain way, being the alternative to that. So thank you so much for that description of all the distortions, because I think it's really important to be able to kind of look at ourselves and our energy systems and how we function in the world with our patterns and programs, in the world, and kind of like take a microscope to, and like these things came from somewhere. We can unwrap this a little bit more, and then that gives us the ability to kind of let us off the hook, or let ourselves off the hook, and work with it, negotiate with it, and sort of like dismantle these distortions, so we can come back into more neutrality, within ourselves, within our life, and kind of dial back these age old patterns that we've been using since childhood, that we got, nature nurture, that we got from the beginning, and sort of unravel those, especially as we come to midlife and beyond. I think it's a lot of deprogramming ourselves to be the person, that we were meant to be, that we were, that we just thought that we had to be something else. But it's like reclaiming ourselves and stepping back into our autonomy and our personal sovereignty, now. And I'm also seeing younger people doing it early, which is beautiful and really gives me hope,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for
You
what's
know,
our future.
So one of the things that I want to mention, this is sparked by what you just communicated, in that we do have conditioned responses, and we're good, man. We know how to organize our energy centers. I mean, we are an advanced organism, let me tell you. And it's been within the last year that I've started using um a device in my office. And essentially, in layman's terms, it just measures balance, it measures energy, and it measures stress. But really, what it is, if I use quantum physics behind it, it allows me to stress the biofield and provoke the biofield so that the electrical impulse goes through like the transparency of the skin, and the skin like creates, and the biofield creates like this cluster of electrons, and these electrons come in contact with air, and this air creates and emits light, and that's what the program reads. And so I've been using it because it tells me not only what's happening within the spine and the balance of the autonomic nervous system, but the energy centers, the chakras. And so I wisened up pretty early on. I'm like, oh, you look pretty organized. You look pretty organized. You've got a pretty organized energy system. And then I'm like, I'm going to stress you out. I'm physiologically, I'm going to make you do 25 squats. And then I'm going to have you come over here and retest and see how you do. And it is fascinating to me, Liz, to see this is when like the distortions start to happen, when you can't like, when your body's in your cardiovascular system is all disrupted, and then you come back in, retest it, and then the alignment of the energy center shows me a completely different pattern. It's fabulous. It's fabulous. And so then I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Let's take this a couple steps further. Let me get like multiple scans on you today. Let me get like 4 scans on you, and then come back next week and let me get like 4 more, and then come back in a couple of weeks and let me get 4 more. And then I do a comparison. I pull all of those 16 of those readings, and I look at the energy centers, and I can see the variability of the energy centers. Like some of them are like spot on, solid and stable, and then the other ones are just trying to figure out like where should I be? Should I be this way today, or should I swing over to the other side? Where should I be? And then that's when I know that there are underlying conditioned responses, mental stuff, blocks that are inhibiting the stability of that energy center. It's so you would dig it. It's like this, it's been the biggest eye opener, and it's visual. People can see it, and then people are like, oh, that's me, that's me. And then it like brings home the points that we've been making for years.
That is amazing because, oh, I love technology because so often we can be blind to our blocks and we don't even know where they are. So to have that technology and to be able to offset somebody, get them a little bit off balance and retest them over and over again is fantastic. Then you can zero in. God, what machine is that?
It's called a BioWell machine. I'm happy to talk
Awesome.
more about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that because that's fascinating. I've never heard about that
Wow,
before.
it is fascinating. It's like my latest and greatest, like what am I passionate about? Because it's validating what I've been intuiting for years. Okay. So what I'm starting to realize, and I've already just got done talking about the energy centers, how they're connected into the endocrine system and how they're connected into the central nervous system. And I really have been in a compassionate state, watching how dysregulated people have become, right? I don't know, due to today's world events, people are having a hard time finding homeostasis and really coming into a relaxed state. So this machine, as I said, is considered to be a gas discharge visualization machine, a um, GDB, which came from Carillion photography over 20 years ago. And it was designed by a couple of Russian physicists. And so they've had 22 years to kind of like bring this device. I think what they're doing is they're bringing this device down as smaller, 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 more affordable, so that ultimately it will be a personal biohacking machine, and they'll be able to really be able to regulate their autonomic nervous systems, to bring their organs back into balance, to bring their chemistry back into balance, and their energetic system back into balance. And so it's like, the wearable devices, whether it be a Garmin watch or an iWatch, or, people use various different apps on their phone to see their sleep cycle, their sleep scores, their activity cycles, and people want to. And I say this, and that technology gives us that feedback, but it gives us feedback over time to where it's validating for people. And truthfully, I think if more people just spent time in meditation, they would get this information, but very few people do actually take the time for meditation practice. But the GDV device, it's been a wealth of information for me to be able to help people. Like, for example, I had a new patient in this morning who, she's a beautiful Iyengar yoga practitioner. She's been doing yoga for years, and she's very organized. If you looked at her, she's got that rigid overlay. She's very organized. And when I looked at her energy centers, man, they were good. They were good. They were, I mean, we're talking about in the 90 percentile for all 4 scans.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, okay. So are you on any pain meds? Are you on any antidepressants? What are you on that's allowing you to stay in that kind of a balance? And then when I started digging into the organ imbalance, the pineal and the hypothalamus showed up as being the biggest distortion between in the autonomic nervous system. So It's like internally within her body, she has, the devil on one side and the angel on the other side. One says speed up, the other one says slow down. So she's getting all these mixed messages within her body, speed up, slow down, speed up, slow down. So she's still trying to figure out how to regulate her system, even though her chakra systems look pretty good. Another thing that was showing was that she's systemic RA. And so I was like, okay, this is going to show up in your third energy center. This is going to show up in the liver and the spleen and then possibly the pancreas. We're going to see it. We're going to see it. And we didn't see it. So I get to see her back, for repeat visits to help her dive into that a little bit further. But the spine did show the level of the liver, did show the level of the spleen, and the thyroid. So those things did show up.
That's incredible. Gosh, that is amazing to have a device like that that could break everything down. And even someone who, looks a certain way can pinpoint, where the weaknesses are, whether that be in the physical body, endocrine system, or somewhere else. That's fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, clearly I'm geeking out over here. So listeners, I'm sorry about that, but that's what's turning me on these days.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's too fun. And to have something, a device that can validate what you've been picking up all along is fantastic. And I think that that's one of the fun things about science right now is finally it's able to validate, when in quantum science and other sciences, what we've been saying and feeling or seeing this whole time, which is really fun.
I love it. I love it because seriously, the biology that I learned 30 plus years ago being replaced by quantum biology or neurology being replaced by quantum neurology, that's been so pivotal. And we are there. You are absolutely right, Liz. It's an extremely exciting time and exciting for consciousness as well.
And this is new too. So you just used a couple words that are new to me. So I've been following quantum sciences, but beyond quantum biology and quantum neurology, like what are you hearing, that's really at the forefront that may be new to me and my listeners in the quantum realm?
Wow. So, well, the basics about, what constitutes our physical body, as far as particles, mass versus energy. And so, and again, I don't have the exact number, but let's say we're 99.99999% energy and we are 0.00001%, however many nines I put in there, 1% matter. And so what they're realizing that the interstitial space, the space between the cells themselves, that's an active part, even though it's void and that there's not anything, substantial, there's a lot of information that's happening within those cells. And so when I say quantum biology, I mean that affects how things go in and out of the cells and how it goes in and out and penetrates various different organs simultaneously. Quantum neurology, the same thing, how we can create coherences, energetic coherence and rhythm coherence that we can modulate and measure. Um, yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know what else to say.
It is fascinating. And I love how, you also brought up meditation too, because meditation is a gateway into all of these things that you're talking about. If you were to say, to me or my audience, the benefits of meditation, how it can help us, reach, you know, different depths in quantum biology, neurology, our chakra system, and our nervous systems, what would be the advice that you would give to us today?
Now, the first thing I want to say and lean into is that the notion that if you're sitting there listening, going, I don't care what she says because I just don't have the time. If you're the person that says, I don't have 10 minutes, then you're the person that needs to sit for 30. So it is true. It is absolutely true. There's something that happens, the multi-dimensional benefits of meditation, I cannot even begin to articulate. Like, and I know a lot about the neuroscience behind it and the neuroplasticity and how we're creating new neural pathways and we can overcome some of the belief systems that have been so conditioned within our brain that we can change all of that through meditation. But the idea, if you enter into the meditation, and the goal is not to make your mind as empty as you possibly can. The goal is to be in a compassionate state of observation. So you can sit there and say, oh, this information just dropped in, and that's interesting. I'll come back to that later, instead of allowing it to be a looping thought for the next 20, 21, however long you sit and meditate. A good day for me on meditation that I typically on the weekends are my 90-minute meditations. And then probably 3 days out of the week is an hour or more. And then there are a couple of days that I have long days in the office, and those are 25-minute meditations. So my invitation, just lean into it without any expectations and just observe.
That's awesome. Beyond meditation, is there anything else that would benefit us in our life? And you were talking about, our nervous system. We've been talking about that a lot, and to regulate, self-regulate or co-regulate, like what does that look like with everything that is going on, around us right now, whether we're watching the news or not, it's around, um, that we can bring in to help us navigate.
Yeah, don't underestimate the power of the breath. Breath is so, so, so important. And when it comes to regulating, polyvagal exercises, as far as regulating the vagus, I think that there's a lot to be said for that. And back to the meditation, this is something that I've practiced. I do light deprivation goggles. I do the bulk of my healings with masks on. I do all my meditations with masks on. I really enjoy that. I originally started doing it because I wanted to fine tune my clairvoyance. And so there are times that I do meditate with my eyes open for that purpose with my goggles on.
Nice. I do the darkening as well, and I find that sleeping in a dark, I sleep in a pitch black room for my
Mhm.
pineal gland to help with melatonin, and it's really been a benefit. Yeah, I agree. And it's really fascinating that you use eye coverings while you're doing your work too.
Mhm. And even, listeners, I do the same thing that Liz does, and you're gonna feel a little goofy, but get some black tape and go in your bedroom. And if you have, like I have a hearing aid charger that had a green light on the back of it that said that it's on, and I'm like, gotta tape that. I had a fire, not carbon dioxide, but a fire smoke detector on my ceiling. Had to tape that. Take the black tape and literally make your bedroom as pitch black as you can possibly get it. And start
Same.
to train yourself, follow the circadian rhythms. If now daylight savings time has passed, it's going to be darker early. When you go home in the evening, don't turn on the bright overhead lights. Turn on your table lamps, or your bedroom lamps, and get them, the lights underneath the horizon of your eyes. Get your body, your circadian rhythms to start shifting, change with the season.
I love that. That's great advice. Thanks, Dr. Mary. This has been a pleasure to host you. I love it. And I love that we went over because you were hitting some topics that I think our audience really needed to hear, that I've enjoyed hearing. I always ask one final question before I ask how people can reach you. What is a jewel of wisdom that you would like to leave our audience with today?
My favorite mantra, and that is relax, open, allow.
I love that. That's beautiful. And how can people reach you? How can they find
You,
you?
my website is a living, breathing organism. So there isn't a week that goes goes by that something doesn't change on that website. And it's my name. It's just www.drmarysanders.com. Everything from the latest podcast to the upcoming events to working one-on-one to discovery calls, it's all there.
Awesome. Perfect. Dr. Mary, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to host you.
The honor is all mine. Thank you, Liz.
Awesome. Thanks. And thank you everyone for joining us again. I'm Liz Peterson and this is Raise the Vibe with Liz. And you can find me everywhere on social media and my website at raisethevibewithliz.com. Thanks everybody. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe.